Good evening, everybody.
Hey, good evening,
Ken.
Good evening. It's good to see everyone. Welcome everyone to episode 575 of Line Upon Line. The similarity between worship of pagan god Molech and the modern West death culture. And I've also been told that we have a new name for the program. We are now going to be called the what was it again? The
Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
no,
the Friday night Bible study.
Friday night Bible study quartet.
Yeah. Friday night quartet. Doesn't that sound good?
We promise not to harmonize anyway. So,
I love that song where the quartet said, "And Abednego." Anyway,
if you'd start us out, Dr. Riggs, that would be great.
Okay, this is speech and mouth groaners, and these are some real groaners. So, if you think about the mouth trap, the mouth is a grocer's fortune, a grocer's friend, a dentist's fortune, a speaker's pride, and a fool's trap.
So true.
This groan is called mouth, not a door. Maybe the eyes are the window of the soul, but that still doesn't make the mouth the door to the brain. This one's called talking too fast. The trouble with people who talk too fast is that they often say something they haven't thought of yet. This one's called turn off the sound. When your mind goes blank, remember, turn off the sound. This one's kind of cute in an odd sort of way, called taxes. Mr. Doofus said to the IRS, "I'm going to pay my taxes with a smile." And they said, IRS says, "No, you're not. You're going to pay with hard, cold cash." And this last one, you got to think to fully appreciate this one. It's the pièce de résistance, sort of, kind of. The guy comes along and there's a trash guy comes along and he sees a trash can has written on a big sign says trash. And so he dumps the trash can, leaves the can behind. A few days later, he comes back and they say, "Mr. Trash Professor, the can is the trash." I guess that's a matter of how you word it. At any rate, that joke was so unusual. I said, I got to tell it because it's so different. The can itself is the trash. Okay, anyway, we're going to talk about death culture. And there's a pagan connection to Molech. I want to just give an opinion here for a second. You realize that the evil spiritual world that encouraged pagans to do bad things and encouraged people like Hitler and Stalin and all their death camps and all the horrible things they did, the demons who encouraged that are still around. The people died, but they're still here. So what are they encouraging us to do now?
Mm-hmm. Scary.
And that's where we're going to get into the death culture. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point. I mean, you think about the demons that Jesus encountered that he cast out of people, how they, on one occasion, they said that the demon made the man cast him into the fire, he tried to throw him into the fire and all of this foaming at the mouth and everything. And to think that same demonic spirit is still around, even though that person lived and died and he's gone on to something else. So sort of scary, that world is still out there, that it exists and it is real. And most people take it very lightly.
It's like there's a magnetic attraction toward evil and even toward a death culture. We just don't know it.
Did you hear the interview with Glenn Beck with the young man or the middle-aged guy? And he told his story about how he was in this culture of demonism when he was a young man in his 20s. And he claims after one night of all of their seances and all of this business, and, you know, I don't know if it's real or not, but he claims that they were practicing this, that had been introduced to him by his one of his buddies and the group that he was running with. And he claims that he actually saw a manifestation that scared him to the, you know, to his very being. And it caused him to reject it. And he, you know, began to go into church immediately and recanted all of that. And it scared him so bad that, you know, he said, I don't ever want to have anything to do with that again. And he admits that, you know, and I don't know how real that is or whether he was having hallucinations or whatever, but he claims he was not under the influence, but he did see a manifestation and it just chilled him to his bones.
It wouldn't surprise me, especially when these people that kind of almost sell their soul for their fame and their fortune, they may get to that point as well. And unfortunately, I think too many of them don't get scared, don't go, you know, and change their life, and they just embrace it. And it's a sick world we live in. I read an article about a guy who was a former Satan worshiper, like you were like, and he used to go to abortion clinics, and he used to perform rituals during an abortion.
Yeah.
They let him into the clinics. You look this up, you'll find this article. It's probably 10 years old or older, maybe 12. But he did this, and he finally scared himself out of, I mean, he turned to a Christian or what have you, or whatever he did, but he finally got out because it just got too bad for him.
Well, when you look at the fascination with, we were talking about this before the show started, you know, the fascination with skulls and with the Gothic, you know, the Day of the Dead in Mexico or whatever, you know, with seances and the occult, and it's everywhere, you know, out there. And you wonder, where does all of this stuff originate? Why would any logical, freeborn person have the opportunity to choose whatever they want in this world, go after that stuff? I remember when we were living in Dallas, Judy and I, one time we went to this like a little mall, and it was like I don't know, like what do you call it? Like where people have booths where they sell things. And we went down a flea market type of an atmosphere. And we went down to the third story, which was below ground. It was like a basement. And down there, they had booth setups with all this Egyptian idols and Egyptian artifacts, replicas, and it was their little statues and their little things that you could almost see an Egyptian worshiping these things, and people were buying this stuff up. And I was like, you know, God brought us out of there, and here we're trying to bring it back in. You know?
Interesting. One thing to think about, if there is a God and the Bible is his word, then evil must also exist.
Mm-hmm.
It is. That's a good point. It's almost proof, Dr. Ricks.
And we look at all the bad things happening in the world, it can't all be just coincidence. Matter of fact, I would ask people to pray for America, the president, and the Middle East and Israel. I would guarantee you, if demons had their way, they'll make a whole mess of everything. And maybe in some ways they don't care who wins. Maybe they do care a little bit of that too. But mostly they just want people to kill each other, create a quagmire of death.
You mentioned, you know, World War II and, you know, the 95 million people that died from that war. You know, I believe that's, you know, Hitler, if not influenced by a demonic spirit, if not possessed of a demonic spirit, anyone that would perpetrate such an evil pogrom on the world is demonic. I think we're going to prove that tonight, that a person just doesn't have that capacity unless they are driven by some evil spirit to do such evil, heinous crimes, I believe.
Him and his henchmen, Goebbels and all them, I'm
Yeah.
sure they all were possessed of something. Especially the ones, what's his name in the concentration camps? What's that, Dr. Mengele? These some of the most evil, vile. If you read about what he did, and you know what the sad part is, we brought a lot of them people right over here, and we employed them, and they found their way into different parts of medical and pharmaceutical fields, and it's just, we should have never got in bed with that mess. Never should have touched it.
We swept a lot of that stuff under the rug because of the benefit that we were going to get out of the experiments that they performed. And that's, we in my opinion, we took an oath with whatever they were doing when we did that.
Contaminated our own self by dealing with that.
I was reading a book, and it's written by a Jewish doctor who was at Auschwitz, and he was exposed everything that went on, all of the tests and everything. I had to stop reading it. I had to take a break from it. It was so bad. I had to take a break. It was mentally taxing. It was just imagining that, how can anyone be so evil? And we wouldn't have knew everything if it hadn't have been for people like him that exposed it.
I had that same feeling when I was reading through Mein Kampf, and I thought, I don't know if I want to get into the mind of somebody that's possessed of a demon. I don't even want to go down that same trail that his mind went, and so I had to put it down. It just, I'm going to take everybody's word for it that read it, and commented on it. That's good enough for me.
There's a similarity. Hitler was thought of as a joke because of his appearance, and when he said he wanted to eliminate all the Jews in Europe, that's crazy. Nobody could even really do that. But he meant what he said, and if the Ayatollah says he wants to eliminate the Israeli state, or at least all the Jews in it, I think we need to take him seriously too.
I do too.
They mean what they say.
History says we should.
Yeah. Now, maybe they won't get the chance to do it, but I think they mean it. And that should be taken into consideration. Kim, we talk about people sliding back into paganism. That's the pressure. And the big why. Could you read Jeremiah 2:10, please, Ken?
And see if there has been such a thing. Has a nation changed its gods, which are not gods? But my people have changed their glory for what does not profit. Be astonished, O heavens, at this, and be horribly afraid. Be very desolate, says the Lord. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed themselves cisterns, broken cisterns.
In a way, he's saying that, and I think this is true. You can pick up almost any place, third world country, second world country. They got some weird religion, but they're loyal to that weird religion no matter what. You take the truth of God and you got to fight to keep it. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's a magnet pulling people away from the goodness of something that's good for you.
You make an excellent point. If you go back and look at Buddhism, Shintoism, Taoism, Confucianism, all of those go back 2,500 to 3,000 years, and they originated. And you have to ask the question: why is Christianity so unattractive? Why is it so unattractive to our youth? Church attendance all across the country is down. And the youth of our country have no, I'm not saying every young person, because there are people that have a devotion to Christianity, but by and large, there's dismissal of Christianity, of going to church. And I believe it is because it's not really being taught. It doesn't really answer the questions that young people have. And more importantly, I believe it's not being lived. I think people are setting extremely poor examples of what a Christian should be, because young people can see hypocrisy a mile away. You know, they can see somebody that says one thing and then lives another way. And I think they're turned off by that. And that's really unfortunate.
Seems like people under about 50 or 55, their church attendance is way down. There are many churches are just surviving on the senior citizens, and that's a dying combination. And I don't know. It's just something to think about. But false gods, they seem to stay forever. Like animism, there are a bunch of places where they worship animals and animal figures and animal spirits, and they worship their ancestors. Crazy as that stuff sounds, it still is fairly popular in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of the, movie stars and people like that are, maybe we call idols of, that people look up to. A lot of those are, they're into that Buddhism and other religions of the world, foreign Eastern religions. And so the young people see that and they think, well, maybe there's something to that, and they follow along.
Yep. By the way, speaking of Molech was depicted, if you see drawings of him, it's like a man's body with a bull's head. And by the way, at least I think he's considered a great Bible scholar. He said that golden calf always bothered him. He thought the translation was bad. It was more like a young bull, because that fits paganism better than a golden calf. Doesn't even look dangerous. It looks kind of stupid and silly. But yeah. I know you can debate translations of words, and maybe a young bull could still be considered a calf, but you know what I mean. I think the young bull gives it more pagan meaning, and that's how Molech was pictured, as a human body with a bull's head, and his arms were stretched out, and his belly, they put a big fire in there, however that fire went up the hollowed arms, and they would toss infants and young children in those hands to be burned alive, and the screams of the kids were covered up by drums.
Well, if you see depictions on the ancient tombs, I agree with you. It's more so that the bull is represented in Syria and Egypt and other foreign civilizations. I tend to agree with you, Dr. Ricks, that it's probably more the idea of a bull than it would be of a calf, some innocent little calf, that's harmless. But there were all forms of torture, from using bulls as well. But that's probably the most hideous. I can't even imagine a parent doing anything. So being so deceived into believing that's what they need to do is sacrifice their innocent child. It's beyond our ability to comprehend.
Nowadays, instead of doing it that way, they kill their unborn child. Because if you think about it, why did they sacrifice their children to Molech? So that something good would happen to them in their life, or something that's terrible gets better. And, their crops come in, or the rain stops, or whatever. Well, it's similar to what they do now, because they don't want a financial hardship. So they want their life. Unfortunately, the society has groomed people to think that's okay and acceptable. They make the path to go there smooth, and you're actually doing a good thing. It's hard, especially for younger people, to not see, because they just make it, they just pound everybody every day with with that. Things will be. It's no big deal. It's just a frog or whatever they tell you, and it's no big deal. And they get people to suckered into it.
You know, I don't know if you watch BBC very often, but in England right now, there's a political debate on euthanasia, you know, and they're really about to vote on this. And of course, the medical industry is against it. And some of the doctors that say, well, you know, we took an oath to preserve life. And here we are actually considering legalizing this. And the problem that one of the doctors that they interviewed, I thought he made a really good point, was, you know, if this passes, then the industry might take a turn and find that it's a whole lot more easy and cheaper to go ahead and just euthanize somebody than it is to fight for their life. And that's the concern that he had for it. There are these rare cases where somebody's suffering so bad that they want to take their own life. And he made the point about, you know, hospice care and how wonderful that is. And we need to do all we can to continue making that better. But if you turn this idea over to the general public and to the doctors making decisions of whether somebody lives or dies, it could be, you know, maybe they don't have the funding to keep you alive because euthanasia is so cheap and the easy route. So I thought you made a good point.
I heard part of an interview today, and maybe Neil in the chat room has heard this. It was out of Canada, and there was an old folks home in Canada. And they had a land lease that still had like 25, 35 years on it. But they owned the building, but they leased the land. And they, the state came in and said, you're not killing enough people, basically. I don't know if that's how they said it, but they said it along those lines. And of course, the home was not lined up like that, so they didn't want no part of that. So what the state did was canceled their lease, took their building, and reopened it under state control, and now they euthanize people constantly. Now, I'd have to make sure it was Canada, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
And I heard the woman that used to work there was giving the interview about it, and that stuff's going on there. Yeah. And we've got it legalized in I don't know how many states in this country.
Yeah. So that's the world we live in.
Yes.
So you want to talk about, you know, the death culture, like you mentioned. This goes along with what Ken said a minute ago. You can go get an abortion. I just looked it up here. Average cost of $500 to $700. Okay. That's on U.S. News Money page. I looked this up the other day. And this does not count foster care. Okay. This is just if you want to go adopt a child in the state of Kentucky. The average cost was $15,000 plus. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with that picture right there?
Yeah, and look at the number of abortions worldwide in 2024. I think was 73 million.
Yeah,
73 million. Unbelievable.
So you can kill a child for 700 or less, but they won't even sell you one, and that's an awful way of saying it, but isn't that what it is for under 15,000? Now that's sad, folks.
It's a money business, man.
Yeah,
they're making money out of it.
One of the problems with socialized medicine is, especially in places like Canada, but in some European countries, financially it's a strain, even though the high taxes is still a strain. So it's incentivized to want to euthanize. I know that rhymes, but incentivized to euthanize. But it really is. And they're working on programs there where if you're a 30-year-old young man and you're depressed and your life's been a disaster, they can offer you some pills to end it all in a nice, calm way. Mm-hmm. You're only 30, you could come out of this and have a great life.
And how, you know, if they're allowing gender transitions for children now, why won't they offer that as well at some point in time? If their life is too miserable and they want to opt out, you know, it's It goes to the farthest extreme, of course, and this is a heavy subject, but it's something to consider, I think.
And abortion is not just the fault of women. So they say a lot of the boyfriends will encourage the girls, look, they probably wouldn't say it this bluntly. I don't want to worry about child support payments. I'll help you pay for the abortion. Isn't that nice of me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm grinning to make a point. I don't know, not that that's nice, but that's what the boyfriend's thinking. Says, yeah, let's get rid of a little piker here, and I want to worry about child support payment for the next 20 years or whatever it is. But that's the world we live in. Can you read Leviticus 18:21, please, Ken? See how God thought about all this sort of thing.
And you shall not let any of your descendants pass through the fire to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord.
In other words, he was one of the worst of the pagan gods, and it was an offense to God when you killed your babies. And God really loves life and hates Moloch. Obviously, when God kills people or whatever, he can resurrect them later in a better environment, controlled environment. God has the right of life and death. But God really was angry at the Canaanites because they did all these evil things like temple child prostitution. They sometimes sacrificed adults as well as little children too.
Mm-hmm. They just became so corrupt that there was no turning back, and God, in a lot of cases, had to destroy them. I think that's why we saw examples in the Bible where God told them to go in and kill every man, woman, and child. I mean, as horrible as that is to contemplate, that society had become so corrupt that there was no turning back. From the things even the little children saw and experienced, they would never get out of their minds, and God had to completely eradicate that in some of these evil civilizations.
There's a movie called Apocalypto about the Aztecs, and maybe others too is involved, and how brutal they were. My son took a cruise and they went to Mexico, and they visited this, I guess it's a pyramid where the Aztecs built, and apparently they have records. I mean, to this day, they have records of how many adults they threw into the volcano. Wow, they actually still have records. That's hard to believe that. It probably shocks you, but yes, not only did it happen, but it's recorded.
And so today we have child abduction and child sex trafficking, and to go right along, like we can't say that we're exempt from that culture when we look at our society and see what happens. And you made a good point that God is a God of life. God said, go forth and be fruitful and multiply. He didn't say, eliminate half of them. He wanted the world to grow and the people to have every opportunity.
Ken, could you read Leviticus 20, verse 2, please?
Again, you shall say to the children of Israel, whoever of the children of Israel or of the strangers who dwell in Israel, who gives any of his descendants to Molech, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I will set my face against that man and will cut him off, because he has given some of his descendants to Molech to defile my sanctuary and profane my holy name.
God made it a capital crime. That shows you how much God values life. And, I keep thinking when a killer is about to murder someone, I don't mean an accident or a fight, really, be nice if he realized, if I get caught, I'm going to sacrifice my life. Yeah. Not get 4 or 5 years in prison, which you might get just for grand larceny. It depends on the lawyers and how it all plays out in court, right? What's the difference? Life is cheap.
In the book of Genesis, it actually says that if you take the life, that God was going to require your blood at the hand of the beast, at the hand of a man. And then if a man shed blood or, killed his neighbor, then it is by that form, he would perish. And it goes on to say that because God created man in his image. A murderer doesn't think about that when he's going after to perpetrate a hideous crime of killing someone, that person was created in the image of God. And most people don't think of themselves that way, that they were created in the image of God. And so they mutilate their bodies in all sorts of forms and fashion that I think disfigure the form that God actually created and made in perfect, in a perfect form. And I think that has a lot to do with this subject as well.
Remember we said that evil is like a magnet that kept drawing Israel? Even the wise Solomon, in his older age, his foreign wives with their pagan background, they pulled him into it, where he had Molech built in Judah. And we assume if Molech was there, they were beating babies to Molech, because that's what they did. And it's hard to believe that Solomon could go that low, isn't it? We don't have to read 1 Kings 11:5, but it's in there. Maybe we could skip that scripture. But I thought, wow, the great Solomon could go that low. And it's amazing how evil seems to attract people. So I want to discuss pagan superstition and the pagan world, because I think many of us don't, when you read the Bible, you think, why does God care about a few idols here or there, or people worshiping idols instead of him? What difference does it make? I think we need to understand what idolatry really was, and it still is in some places. Oh, by the way, did you know that they believe that of the children that were trafficked across our border, they know of 300,000 of them are missing?
I heard that statistic. I didn't know it had been verified or if it's verifiable, but I've heard that number before. It's astonishing. Where do they go?
Apparently, a lot of these drug traffickers, they probably told the parents, "Oh, your kids be better off." And a lot of, they got too many kids or whatever. They think they can someday send the money back to their impoverished country. So the kids get on the caravan, and it helps them come across. I'm part of a family. They kind of use them to get across, and our border people let them all in previous 4 years. And they will say, well, we're going to Chicago. I got a cousin up there on or something. And they never show up. We assume the drug cartels that control it, maybe in some ways on both sides of the border.
Yeah.
They're big in Houston. We just don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
As well as on the other side of the border. The drug cartels have them. And it's amazing. Nobody seems to be that concerned about them.
You brought up the point of Solomon building up these, temples to all these gods. And he did it. I think he did it for political expediency. I think he did it for favoritism among the populace. But either way, it brought down the nation of Israel. It was probably one of the biggest factors that brought down the division of the nation of Israel. And you look at our society today, we're a divided country. We have half on the, one side of the political spectrum that seem to be, God-fearing, God-following people. And then you have the other half, and I'm not dividing these specifically along party lines, but you have a divided nation that seems to have moral ethics and moral values on one side, and the other side seems to have none whatsoever. And it is creating a huge rift and a divide in our nation. And I think if we don't wake up and see what happened to the nation of Israel and realize that we're headed down the same course, then we too could be in dire straits as a nation as a result of something that most people don't think could actually affect our country.
I don't see how we ever repair the divide. I can't see any path that I don't care if someone attacks us or it doesn't matter. I don't think the country as a whole will ever. They'll take the side of the people that attacked us. It's insane where we're at in this country right now.
You know, they say that Rome fell not from without, but from within, the internal rot within the own society. That says something for the most powerful nation on the earth at that time, that had legions of armies that could have fought any war in any direction from Rome, and yet what was going on in their own society is what brought them down.
Yep.
I think they say pedophilia is the next standard that will fall.
Oh, it's already on its way.
Yeah.
I can see that. And there's no low that they won't go and say, well, it's now acceptable.
And you know what? It's only been about 10 years since gay marriage has kicked in.
Yeah.
And we've gone, and I knew it when it did it, that the next thing on the list was pedophilia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming.
What's
Children
left?
become
What's
a
left
commodity.
after that? How far can you go?
Don't want to know, but it's scary. I know this isn't quite the same topic, but we got this letter from about libraries, and he said, you think they do this drag queen library to little kids only in New York and California, maybe in Chicago? He says, no, libraries have this garbage all over the country. You just don't know about it. I thought, wow.
Yeah, there was one here in Colorado just a couple of days ago where they got up and paraded around in front of the whole audience, and grown-ups are sitting there watching that, just accepting what's happening there. And you know, it's just mind-boggling that anybody would let their child, their little children, be subject to that that activity. And I think it's okay. It's good for the wholesome for the child to watch and see that. It's beyond me.
A gay strip show for kids who probably don't even know when I was 5 and 6, I didn't even know what gender was. I didn't know what a lot of things were. I was a little more naive than probably most, but I didn't even know what gender was when I was 5 and 6. What? Anyway.
If you notice, all of these movements, whether it's religious or social or whatever, they always come for the kids.
Always.
Always. They come for the kids, the most innocent.
Yeah.
And that's straight out of what we're reading in the scriptures. You know, that is the devil's playbook.
He likes to corrupt the kids and destroy them first.
And they're grooming them, whether they admit it or not. You know they're grooming them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I guess he just likes to bring mankind to its lowest form. And that's what he's always actively pushing to do.
Well, if you look at those footprints too, Hitler did that. He wanted to start the youth from 5 years old and start, brainwashing them to the ideology that he had, so that as they got to be teenagers, then he would have a whole new army of people that believed in his system, his society that he was trying to build.
They're pushing for like 2 and 3 year olds now in this country. The left really wants to corrupt them young. There was I was reading an article or something about a woman who's a kindergartner teacher. She exposes her kindergarten kids to all this disgusting stuff, and including the cross-dressing, whatever, and all this. That she's just vile, man.
Well, now we're putting cell phones in the hands of little children. So, this corruption has its way right into their hands, in the form of technology, which is, it's not funny, but, a lot of people their children have cell phones, and there's really no control over what they view on that. And so what they feel is acceptable.
I should have brought this up a long time ago. There is a way. If you have young kids in your house and you only let them on your internet, to filter all that stuff out. There's a service, and I'll have to think of the name of it. My internet runs through it, and you can tell it to shut out. You got a little checkbox. Now, there's ways around it, but the young kids, when the young ones don't know that, but I just don't want to see it. So I have certain things checked. And if you get on my internet and you just try to go into certain things, you're not going to get there. You're going to get this splash screen.
Mhm.
That's good. You know what? Paganism, most of the pagans, they were afraid of nature because life was hard, and they worried about things about storms and floods and losing wars and crops that didn't come in. Like if you read about the Greek gods on Mount Olympus, they were often evil and infighting, and a lot of gruesome stories. So the gods were kind of wrathful. So to appease the gods, you had to give them something valuable, like children.
Mhm.
As weird as that sounds, and other weird sacrifices. And so when Paul is talking to the Romans about meat and idols and other things, would you read 1 Corinthians 10:19, Ken, and see what he said?
What am I saying then? That an idol is anything, or what is offered to idols is anything? Rather, that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons.
So even though the idol is nothing, Moloch was nothing, the bull god, the eagle god, actually they had a scarab god in Egypt. That's just a beetle, bug. And they really have some weird gods, but whatever animal it is, or half animal, half human, maybe those things aren't real, but behind them is a demonic spirit.
Yeah, and again, what's the fascination with, the things we see in movies, horror movies, slasher movies, whatever, the blood, the, dinosaurs that eat human beings with these ferocious teeth. And, and here we read a scripture that says that they're directly associated with demonic powers and demonic influence. And so you ask the question, do demons really revel in the fact of human beings dying and being blown up, or in wars, or the huge loss of life, or murder, the murder of an innocent human being? You remember on one occasion, James and John said they wouldn't receive Jesus, and James and John said, shall we call down fire from heaven and destroy this town because they didn't receive us? And Jesus said, you don't know what spirit of which you are, exercising. And he sort of chided them because he knew that the spirit that was bringing that about was not godly. It was something that was satanic, to destroy a whole village over that one thing. And I think he recognized that, and he recognized his own disciples were subject to being, the hint was in their mind to do that, and that was demonic.
Yeah. And I think this is the kind of thing. And also, there's one more thing that you read from ancient history. Pagan religions, they call it polytheism. They believe in many gods. They might have a local god and a couple of favorite gods, all had a female consort, Astaroth, or had other names for her. But you may have a host of gods, but they had no moral code like the Ten Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that. And also, many of them had temple prostitutes, because Paul mentions that. And many of these prostitutes were sold when they were children as sex slaves, like a 10, 11, 12-year-old girl be sold by her parents, maybe for good luck, whatever money, to the priest. And that girl, until her body was, screwed up, would be a temple prostitute. And actually, this I get from television, but I presume it's true. Johns actually prefer young boys and young girls and not mature people to buy. There's a shocker there.
The Roman soldiers were that way. They often had a young boy that accompanied them. It's just a fact of history, because that was rampant in that society, and accepted too. It's hard to imagine that would be accepted in a society, but we may not be too far away from that.
People who've been to Iraq say they saw the same thing there among some of the soldiers. Now, they couldn't openly say they were gay, but they did things with boys that would shock you. And I've heard that from more than one source. So it's out there in the world where you wouldn't expect it to be, even now. Ken, would you read 2 Chronicles 33:1, please?
Did evil in the sight of the Lord, Manasseh did evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places which Hezekiah his father had broken down. He raised up altars for the Baals, and made wooden images, and he worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. Also he caused his sons to pass through the fire in the valley of the sons of Hinnom. He practiced soothsaying. He used witchcraft and sorcery, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord.
He was, in many respects, considered the worst king of Judah.
Yeah.
He did repent before he died, a deathbed type repentance somewhat. But the point is, host of heaven, that means they worship the sun, moon, and stars. And, there's still a lot. You can still find those little things in newspapers today about your star chart and what it tells you to do and not do. And Sunday sunrise services. And anyway, the Valley of Hinnom is where Molech was moved. The Molech statues were in the nation of Judah. And so when you see that, that means that's where they're killing their babies to Moloch, in the Valley of Hinnom. And Jeremiah mentions that in Jeremiah 32:35. We're not going to read it, but I just want to, in case you want to look it up, you can see it. That's where Moloch was, in the Valley of Hinnom. And one of the things that I think is true is good godly leadership would help the people of Israel, the people of God, move away from paganism. So like a brace or a guardrail that holds you in place. But when that good leadership passed away, to old age usually, they would always veer off course. Kind of amazing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Without that moral code that you talked about, Dr. Ricks, when the moral code was there and the leader was there that was offering resistance to that and also warning against the consequences, the people would sort of follow in behind. But if you go read the book of Judges, or you read the entire Chronicles and the Kings, it's a repetitive story. There'd be a good king, and then they would fall away, and then they would fall into captivity or be under bondage for a certain amount of years, and then God would hear their prayers, and he would rescue them and send another good judge or another good king. But as long as that person stood in the gap there and warned the people and stopped them and chastised them, they would listen. But when they would fall away or lose that person that had the courage to stand up against it, then the resistance was gone, and they invariably fell into despair once again. And that's almost the automatic results.
Yep.
It's like being in a deep forest. If you follow the wrong path, you're going to lead you to bigger and bigger disaster. And bad leadership takes you the wrong way. Ken, would you read Judges 2:18, please?
And when the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge. And it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they reverted and behaved more corruptly than their fathers, by following other gods to serve them and bow down to them. They did not cease from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way.
As if there's something wrong with Israel or the people of God. They have a hard time staying in the good track. Would you read 2 Kings 23:10, please, Ken?
And he defiled Topheth, which was in the valley of the son of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or daughter pass through the fire to Molech.
And that was the good king Josiah. So like you were saying, Stan, you got a good king. He destroyed all the Molechs and forbid people from burning up their babies, which is crazy even to say it, isn't it?
You know, I wanted to make the
yeah.
point too. You said that, you know, good leadership. The nation would be blessed if there was good leadership or godly leadership. I wanted to even go a step further to say that even the people that didn't believe in God were blessed because of a godly leader, because they lived under the umbrella of freedom and peace and safety when there was good leadership. Now, they won't ever give the credit to God for that or for the godly leader, but they benefit from it too for a certain period of time, I should say. You know, God will eventually deal with people who reject him, but, you know, they benefited from it, but they never gave God the credit for it.
And I think people need to be taught to respect the Bible and Bible principles. And a lot of what comes out of a lot of the judges make decisions like, oh, that Bible stuff is bad. I mean, you get that impression, don't you?
I heard it on the radio today. I don't want to go Old Testament on you. That was the comment. I don't want to go Old Testament on you, but, you know, we dare not go to the Old Testament for any
Retribution?
well, no, for any advice or
Okay.
instructions on how to live or govern our country. You know, it's almost like that's so foreign to most people when it's exactly what we need. And most people have no concept of what the Bible actually says about that. And I mean, you know, comedians make fun of it, you know, politicians make fun of it, and religious people make fun of it.
Oh, yeah.
And it is the pure, unvarnished truth of God that is glaring us in the face, and we reject it, we tear it up, we throw it, we spit on it, and we choose to go down this path that's leading us, you know, in the direction we're going now. And the Bible is there. We don't need a man to stand up. It is there screaming out loud God's way of life, and men will just not pick it up. They will just absolutely reject it. And you said something about Israel a while ago. It describes them as stiff-necked and hard-hearted, and that's exactly what they are, even to this day.
You know, people as a whole do not want to submit to God, and that's a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
You to submit to His ways, and then you just naturally won't want to be part of what we're talking about. That'll be natural. But if you don't submit and you want to be rebellious, time and time again, this is what we find people do. And it's kind of what I wanted to touch on what Dr. Rick said it earlier, talking about the Canaanite people. You know, when you mentioned go Old Testament style, I've heard that same thing, you know, same saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people only look at that part. They don't look at it that the society that had to be taken out was just so evil, you know, and they just overlook that part, that God didn't do it because, you know, he's just a bad guy. You know, it was just a evil society that was, you know, they're just vile in everything that they did.
According to their standards today, there is no society that could be that evil. The way they consider it, everybody has a right to do whatever they want, and we could never attain to such an evil place that we would need to be destroyed. That's their thinking, is that anybody can do anything they want. And, you know, like Solomon did, one of the things that I thought about that story is letting everybody have their way is not always the right thing to do, because it leads to moral decay.
Yeah.
It leads away from God, because in order to follow God, there are rules, there are, you know, commandments, there are his guidelines for living and moral code. And when you venture away from that, then you lead into a scattering of the people, and the division and the effects of what we see in our society today are result.
So many people seem to be infected by one form of evil or another nowadays. Even Christians with their anti-Semitism. I mean, and it's bad. And a lot of Christians just they justify their hatred of the Jewish people in Israel, and it's just so thick, especially on social media. If you're not on it, you're not seeing it. But it's just bad out there.
It's there. It certainly is.
Kind of amazing too. And some Christian pastors, I'm told, have shown signs of anti-Semitism, which is, well, I guess it's not a total shock. That's happened in centuries past, but America never had that. The Jews had their greatest acceptance and integration and success in America than any country in the entire world. And that's been true up until, with a little problem here. There was nothing major, but minor problems here. They were not big ones. Up until maybe just the last few years, till these colleges got everybody all into this anti-colonialism, CRT garbage, oppressor stuff. The Jews are the oppressors and the Arabs are the victims. You realize how unrealistic that is?
And you know what?
That is?
I don't understand why they call the United States colonialists. We have never, once the United States, we have never taken one single country and turned them into a colony.
No.
Now, England did that. We became a colony of England, but the United States itself never done it.
If the United States at the end of World War II, we could have taken over Japan and Germany and half the globe if
Italy.
We wanted to. We could have taken over and ruled the world if we wanted to. We had the capacity. We turned around and gave all of those countries back to our former enemies and then helped rebuild them. Them. We certainly did.
And
then gave them favorable trade deals, which they've abused.
And they're not appreciative. They burn our flag over there. Patton wanted to take Russia right after he wanted to take out the Soviet Union. I wish he would have. I wish he would have.
And so did Churchill.
Yeah.
Or at least limit them. But, oh well, life worked out. Evil Stalin got a lot of breaks. And our people were naive about, and the British people who are kind of leaders in that field, well, they're kind of naive about the danger of communism. I understand the naivete because colleges teach, the Russian socialism, it hasn't worked yet, but it's going to work. Just give them some more time. You know how crazy that sort of thing is. But let's look at the death culture, because the secular part of our society is really big on the death culture. And I want to mention one thing that most people never think about as part of the death culture. There's abortion, but there's also the sterilization of teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you realize that's part of the, let's say if you take a 13-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, and through either drugs or surgery, you sterilize them. But really, you can't change a boy into a girl to a boy, not functionally. So you sterilize them. You realize that, let's say if they're going to average 2 kids per person, 2 or 3, that's like advanced murdering 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything is designed. The end result of our culture today, globally, except for the Muslim world, is to reduce the population. Everything. If you take it to its nth degree, all this stuff you just talked about with the younger people, they can't have kids after they undergo all this stuff. After they undergo the drugs for so long, they can't have children. All this stuff is designed to lower the population. There is an evil working behind the scenes to do this.
Would you read Romans 1:21?
And they think they're doing God's work.
Yeah, that's the scary part.
They think they're doing God's work, so they reduce the population of the globe so we can all live. Oh, it's just sick. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were they thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like a corruptible man, and birds, and 4-footed animals, and creeping.
And that's what idols are. They're maybe half man, half lion. You see some of those in Egypt. They had a lion's body and Pharaoh's head. And there are a bunch of statues still out there, some with birds' heads and wings and a man's body, and some have wings on their feet. Was that Mercury that had wings on his feet? Anyway, all kinds of weird stuff like that in the pagan world. Well, in our world, we do things that are bad. By the way, do you know what would help? We have the population bomb that Elon Musk talked about that's hurting the Western world. Now, Japan may not be Western, but it's hurting Japan a lot too. You have all these people retiring, not enough young workers to support them. Like a hollowed out population if you looked at it on an age scale. Well, the best way to increase population is through marriage. Mm-hmm. But can't you see the judges, the decisions they make, the easy divorce, and they just make it painful, a lot of marriage type decisions. They're actually working hard to undermine marriage.
Yep, that's what gay marriage was about, because marriage is the one purpose of marriage is reproduction. That's the purpose of it, and there is none in that, and that's why they wanted access to it. Once they had access to marriage, then they everything flows downhill, and now you're getting the pedophilia and this craziness with their lopping parts off and adding parts on and all this craziness that if we'd had said we were going to be, if we told people 50 years ago or 20 years ago we were going to end up here, they'd have thought we were nuts, but here we stand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I know young men now, because of legal decisions about child support, other bad things they've done with internet dating as well, they're afraid to get married. They don't trust the other party. You know what I'm saying?
You're right. No,
so
you're right.
marriage has become unpopular compared to where it was 20 years ago.
And you look at nations like France, their growth rate is actually declining dramatically.
Yeah.
There's the idea is come forth that if they don't do something about that, they could, cease to be a nation if they don't change that trajectory.
And these crazy leftists have convinced them that unless they import the third world nation, that they will cease to exist as a country, but instead they're importing their own demise.
Mm-hmm.
That will kill them faster than anything else that they do or don't do.
Let's say if we have less than replacement birth rate in Western countries, but you import a bunch of people from around the world in, all you'll get is balkanization, where you'll have a little Cambodia, a little Mexico, a little Venezuela. I'm probably forgetting something, but you know what I'm saying. You won't have a united country, and the country will never be the same. There are parts of France that are no-go zones, even for their own police. They have to go. You see how crazy that is?
Look at London.
We have that in the United States now, in New York City, in Los Angeles. I mean, I drove off the interstate there one time, exited off, tried to get some gas, dropped off into Chinatown, and I felt like I was in a foreign country. And I was not happy about being there. I mean, there's all different kinds. I was talking last week about driving out to Long Island, and you go through an Arab, an Arab portion of Long Island there before you get out onto Long Island there. That I felt like I was in the Middle East. And then there's another section beyond that, and then you're out in the country and you feel like I'm back in Texas again. So we have those the Irish population and the Italian population and the Jewish quarter. I mean, it is prevalent in big cities like that.
There's small towns in Indiana that every shop is in Spanish. There is some English translation, but the large letters on their headers and on their signs is all Spanish. And maybe you'll see an English translation underneath of that in small letters. And this is Indiana. And you drive down Morse Road in Columbus, and you feel like you're in a third world nation.
It's if you get less of a birth rate and more illegal immigration, it'll get worse and worse and worse.
Mhm.
So it won't be America. By the way, with some groups like Irish Americans, they're not hostile,
No.
and they more or less amalgamate to some great extent. But a lot of these communities are hostile.
Mhm. Yeah, I forget how
They're
many
hostile, really.
known terrorists are in our country now that happened in the last 4 years. I mean, there were thousands of them. Like 3,000 known terrorists have made their way into our country, and you know, we're hopefully we will get those people out of here. But they're here, and if you know they're here, they're working to try to just bring down America or destroy our infrastructure or something in our country. So
they have police cars in New York painted up like a cop car, but they're Sharia law cops in their own neighborhoods. And they go around and they're enforcing their laws on people in our country.
And get away with it.
Yeah.
It's I'm told that if you're Jewish and you wear Jewish clothes in New York City, you got to be really careful where you are.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was never true. New York was always a pro-Jewish city.
Yeah.
For the most part, minor exceptions, but for the most part. And so that's a real change. And I just think, in parts of Europe, they say the terrorists can go into large suburbs that are all Islamic and hide out because they just blend in with the culture. People might know they're terrorists, but nobody is there going to say anything because that's, Islam is more of a dominating, aggressive culture. So they can hide out there and be relatively safe till they're ready to strike out. I think, wow. And I almost guarantee you that if our border was open for 4 years, there must be a lot of sleeper cells in America.
Yeah. Of every nation, China, the Arab nations or, the hostile Arab nations that are out there that are anti-America, they're here.
So they've been coming here since the 90s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah. With late-term abortion, sterilization, euthanasia of the elderly. In some countries, by the way, they don't listen to the elderly. They think, well, you're too old and feeble. They talk to their children and the doctor. And if maybe the child is 55, 58, I could get the insurance policy or get the farm. You know what I'm saying? If I can get the doctor to send grandpa off to Happy Land, and they get to decide.
Mm-hmm.
And not now that I'm getting older, it doesn't seem so old, but not the 78, 88 or whatever it is, 79-year-old grandpa. They decide, and the doctor, slips them the medicine, and you see how crazy that is?
Yeah.
But that's true in some European countries today.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just got to take care of your faculties and make sure you can make good decisions.
and keep your kids happy with you so that when you get old, they won't want to say, yeah, Dad, never mind. Here's my chance to get the family farm. Like that. Like the eye doctor told me, but he was a good researcher and he meant it, but it was true. He said, we don't really know what causes glaucoma as it's associated with age. So we can't really cure it, but we can do things we're going to try to maintain some level of eyesight until something else takes you out.
Yeah, we don't hear it.
You didn't hear that, huh?
No.
Okay. You didn't hear the laughter. Oh, well.
No.
That's too bad. Well, anyway, I turned the laugh box on. You didn't hear it, but it was too far away. But, you got to laugh or you cry. But that's the world we live in. I know that, but we do need to encourage marriage because that's where the birth rate has its best chance. And that's the thing that paganism and the death culture is working against.
Yep.
Absolutely. And we've gone through all of the points here in the Bible about, not all of them, but a lot of the points in the Bible here about this paganism and idolatry. And that sounds like an Old Testament word, but it is something that's alive and well in our country today.
Oh yeah.
And we need to really guard against that in our society and our neighborhoods and our communities and in our families, that we don't drift off into some form of worship that's not pleasing to God, and we lose His protection.
And I even have a different thing. I think we should encourage young people to get married. I know that you wait till you're old enough to know what you're doing. Yeah, but I think if you're 21, 22, 23, getting married, unless you're really bad off, get a job and get married. Don't you think?
You get old enough to know what you're doing, you may not get married.
And then when you finally think you know what you're doing, your body has gotten to the point where it's hard to get pregnant anymore. Yeah, anyway, that's the reality people are learning. I'll wait till I'm 36 or 7. I'll have everything made, then I'll have kids. Well, yeah, you never know. Anything on prophecy we want to discuss? Because there's so much going on, I'm not sure what is the most important thing to mention.
Well, all I would say is keep an eye on Israel right now. It's just getting crazy out there with them and Iran and Jordan, or not Jordan, but it's just crazy. It's just they're they got so many people that may want to take them out soon. I don't know. Everybody wants to jump in, but nobody wants to jump in. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, and I would say watch out for the alliances that Iran has with China and Russia. That how is that could that foment, or could that, could they, Russia actually has an agreement with Iran, even though it's not that they would come to their aid in a military incursion, which would include Israel and the United States. But, those Axis type powers is what, began World War I and World War II. And it really sends a warning flag up to me when I see great powers like that aligning together, and it's dangerous ground.
There is something to be said. And I'm trying to look up his name, but maybe Stan will know, maybe Dr. Ricks will know. There was a leader from like the Turkish area back in the 1300s. And Trump once said that he is a reader of history and biographies. He liked that kind of stuff. And there was a leader out of the Turkish area back in the 1300s that dealt with Persia. And it's interesting. He gave them 60 days to make up their mind to join him or not. And they didn't. They kind of basically thumbed their nose at him, and he went in and killed as many of them as he possibly could. And of course, after that, they didn't have no choice. But Trump gave them 60 days in Iran to get their act together,
which is Persia.
Which is Persia.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of this king's name. Oh,
was he a caliph or something? Caliph something other?
What's his name? Here it is. Tamerlane. You ever heard of Tamerlane?
I have. I've heard the name. I didn't know the history behind it. I've heard that story before, though. I vaguely remember that story.
He basically organized the Middle East into kind of how it's set today.
Mm-hmm.
If you look him up, isn't it Tamerlane? And he gave Persia 60 days to get their act together, and Trump gave Iran 60 days to get their act together, and they didn't. But I think what you said about China has a lot to do with it as well. I think Trump's trying to get Iran to dump China and start working with us. and stop the nuke garbage. Just because Trump always wants to make deals. He's always trying to be the nice guy to make the deals and get people to do it. And he just say, why don't you just hook up with us? Stop this crazy nuke nonsense, and you guys will be, filthy rich. And they turned him down, and I think that's when he let Netanyahu go in there and take out half their leadership.
Yeah.
And then
Here's
there's
a
been... Go ahead.
Here's a possibility that the combination of Trump and Netanyahu and Israel could reshape the Middle East and to some extent the world. Trump has somewhat isolated Iran. And I think because of Trump's influence, China and Russia aren't going to do too much. Although this is really bad news for China. China's got a bunch of problems. They need Iranian oil. But now, of course, all this could go bad. I'm sure the demons want to go bad. But if it goes as it could, Iran could go back under the Shah of Iran, could become a constitutional monarchy. Western, mostly the country folks are kind of religious, but the city folks are mostly westernized, allied with America. China won't be able to get the cheap oil anymore, not like they had the deal they had before. China's economy is already suffering. Russia won't be able to get all those weapons from Iran anymore. Russia will probably be more inclined to make a deal on Ukraine. And Trump may be able to get the Abraham Accord spread throughout the Middle East. In other words, American domination, and Israel is proving itself the military superpower of the Middle East. I realize it may not be obvious, but their army and their air force has proven themselves the toughest thing in the area.
Yep. And now he's giving them 2 weeks, right? Didn't Trump say he's going to make a decision in 2 weeks, which gives Netanyahu 2 weeks to finish the job?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And now there's an Iranian guy I'm listening to on YouTube. I realize he's biased. He thinks they're going to, within 2 weeks, the fall of the Islamic Republic, it will fall. A lot of the Islam, they murdered people in the past. That's how they kept them quiet. They're brutal. But he says their army is kind of on the run. They don't have the police power they used to have. Israel is bombing their police stations. And now the people aren't so afraid. He thinks they're going to overthrow the Shah. And the Ayatollah is hidden in a bunker outside the city, cut off from communications because he's afraid to use cell phones because Israelis might find him and blow him up. I mean, that's what they say, he says.
Well, that would be
I don't know.
If you take out their power structure to oppress the people have been trying to rise up there ever since 79 and when Carter stabbed them in the back. So if he takes out their ability for their to oppress and to scare and intimidate the people there are ready to. They've tried it I don't know how many times. They may just rise up and drag what's his name out into the town square and stone him to death. Who knows?
Well, I hope they can get a regime change. I know everybody's afraid American boots on the ground. I guess that could happen. But I'm hopeful. The worst we'll do is maybe bomb a few things, but we won't put boots on the ground. We won't get dragged into a long, I realize that's what Satan would want, a long extended war. But if it goes the good way, this could be the ascendancy of Israel and America in the Middle East.
It would be nice, but
and a decline of terrorism. Now, I know it's not going to last forever. I'm not that naive, but if it could last for 8, 9, 10 years, that would be a blessing to the world.
Or 3.5 even.
And we could eventually get better oil prices, right, Stan?
Yep, we could. We certainly could.
We were down there for a minute, and now we're back up.
Trending up. We're trending back up to $75 a barrel.
Yeah.
They're talking about us sending these bunker bombs over there and staying out of the war, but sort of delivering this one-off bomb to destroy the underground nuclear facility they have. But we really don't want to get involved in that war. I don't see how we could do that and not be involved. You know, I mean, I think the Iranians already know that we are allied with Israel and that we're furnishing them with, you know, help there, even though don't have boots on the ground. We don't have any aircraft in the area. But look at did you see the list of battleships around the region there? You talk about having force around that whole region. That's a little bit scary too, to realize that many military implements of war are that close proximity. I mean, it could erupt in something very dramatic very quickly. I don't know if you've ever read how many nuclear warheads we have on the submarines that we have, but we've got enough to annihilate every man, woman, and child just out of the submarines that we have running around underwater. That these nuclear weapons that are on board. But anyway, anytime you get a bunch of wildcats in the same pen, you got to be really careful, you know, because it could erupt quickly.
If something could go wrong, I mean, first admit it. And I know, just like with World War I, they tried to stop it at the last minute, but couldn't. You know, Satan would love us to get suckered into something we didn't intend to get suckered into. So I tell people, pray about it. Pray that the president makes the best decision, Netanyahu's people are successful, that the Iranians themselves, not Americans, can overthrow the Islamic Republic. And we could have, because they sponsor most of the terrorist groups in the Middle East.
You know, and it's not, what I understand, it's not the Iranian people. It's the radicals that are in control. The Iranian people are somewhat, you know, good people. I mean, they're average people. They're good, you know. Maybe they would really adopt democracy in a great way if they were to overthrow this regime, this evil, you know, dictatorship that is dragging their whole country down.
And they're Persians. They're not like Arabs or the rest of the Middle East. They're Persian. They're different people.
And very clever.
They've been suckered into this by their leadership.
Yeah.
And don't worry, I already alerted the networks that we were going late. So.
Okay, I know I need to shut up so you all can get to your homes and rest, right?
We're home. But if that's it, I will say goodnight to everyone. I want to thank everyone for watching. Everybody try to stay cool for the next, 7 or 8 days. We're going to be I think we're going to hit 98 on Sunday, which we're not used to that much around here. I think my dogs will melt along with my chickens at 98 degrees, but we'll try to keep them cool. So thanks everyone for watching and enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. And we'll see you back here again next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
I'm going to log off right away. I need to rest.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.